The Moton Mailbag is brought to you by the Robert Russo Moton Museum, located in Farmville, Virginia. The Moton Museum is a civil rights museum focusing on the history of Prince Edward County between 1951 and 1964.
Hi, I'm Kanan, and this is the Moton Mailbag, Season 2, Episode 7.
I'm Irene.
And I'm Leah. Alright guys, how you doing?
It's a little chilly outside.
A little brisk.
I mean, it went from 75 to 40 like I saw a state trooper, so I'm quite cold.
Yeah.
I don't like it. But it's like, I could buy a new blanket, right? Right? Shouldn't I get this brand new beautiful blanket?
I mean, you could,
I'm just saying.
but you could.
I mean, it's good weather to eat like, chicken and dumplings or like something like chili. I don't eat chili, but like something hearty, like something that's
This
like
is crock pot
warms your
weather.
inside.
Soup
Crock pot
food.
weather.
Yeah.
Soup, something that's hearty.
Yeah.
Speaking of food. Alright guys, you ready for our Thanksgiving question?
No.
That's too bad it's coming. We have to, alright, you
Deep
gotta
sigh.
get rid of one Thanksgiving food.
Easy. Turkey.
Turkey.
Kanan, quit shaking your head over there. Quit doing it. Nope. Stop that.
You can't get rid of the only... It's not Thanksgiving if there's no turkey.
People not everyone eats turkey though.
Yeah, some people don't eat turkey. However, you can't not have turkey is quintessential for Thanksgiving. It is Thanksgiving. Like
But
the
do you have to
president
eat
doing.
it?
You don't have
That's
to
why the
eat
president
it.
pardons the turkey,
Yes,
so
you
we don't
pardon
eat
it.
it.
You do the
And
turkey
that's
pardon.
one more reason to not eat turkey.
I don't even know which one I would get rid of, to be honest.
The turkey.
Cranberries. Anything related to cranberry.
You know, like the cranberry jelly that's not actually cranberry things?
Anything related to cranberry can go.
Really?
Anything. Is that your favorite part? It's annoying. But anyways, cranberries.
Really?
Interesting.
I've never even had the cranberry in a can or freshly made, and I never plan on it.
I don't know what.
Cranberries are gross. They're tart, and I don't know
Yeah.
why they get associated with Thanksgiving.
Because they're tart and they goes really well with turkey.
'cause they're
and
red?
they have on a sandwich. Yes.
They're red.
Yeah,
Fall
it's-
colors,
yeah,
red,
vibrancy.
orange, yellow.
Do they grow in the fall? Is that where they're associated?
I think that's when they
about
get them
that.
out the bogs. The cranberry bogs are wild.
I didn't know
Yeah.
they came from bogs.
Yeah, fun fact, there's wolf spiders that are introduced into the bog.
Or
Yeah, so somebody was like, oh, I need a job. And they went and applied. And then when they were getting the cranberries, the wolf spiders climbed on the highest thing because they flooded the bogs. That's the people. I'm like, I would have died.
That's real scary.
I don't do spiders.
No.
well, I'm not going to linger in this getting rid of turkey as part of Thanksgiving. It's like getting rid of love on Valentine's Day. So I think we should go ahead and get to these questions because my feelings are hurt.
Oh.
No.
All right. So our first question: what's your favorite quote about history?
You want to go first, Sarah?
Yeah. So I'm a little upset because I cannot find the exact quote that I'm thinking of, and I cannot remember it exactly, but it goes somewhere along the lines of history in the future, in the present, it's not a coincidence. History is a series of choices that we make that lead up to what is currently happening. The idea that we foresee the future because we're making these choices, and we can, not always accurately predict, but for the most part, we can predict what's happening, and we understand what's happening now because we can look back at those choices that we made in the past.
Any correlations? Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think in a similar vein for me, any quote, which is I don't even pick one specific because there's so many quotes kind of similar to this, but basically just any quote about knowing your past to know your future, kind of thing, or any foolish person who doesn't look at their past is history is doomed to repeat itself. Like any of those, myriad of quotes of that way. There's a word in I believe the language of Ghanaian language, and made this word Sankofa, right, which has always resonated with me strongly, and the picture of Sankofa is a swan with his head turned backward, If you Google it, you'll see two images. One is the swan, and the other is like a heart, a special design heart. But essentially, saying you have to know your past before you can know your future, and before so you can have a better future.
Yeah.
Any myriad of the quotes about that are kind of my favorite, my go-to.
Yeah. I picked a Baldwin quote. I read a lot of James Baldwin earlier this year, and the quote is, "People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them." I'm like, yep, that seems about right. Because obviously, as a historian, you see history everywhere because it is everywhere, and the choices that people made and the impacts that came after. Yeah, definitely trapped in it. So
yeah.
Good. Next question.
Yeah.
And this one's mine.
Yes.
Right? Oh, okay. I was like, just making sure. And y'all going to catch me if I'm paraphrasing, but basically, it reads like, is it better to rename or recontextualize?
So, my opinion on this is I think you have to do a little bit of both. I think if you rename and you don't recontextualize, then what you've done is surface level. You know, you haven't done anything that sort of really goes in to address the problem at hand, to deal with the situation. And, you know, and vice versa. If you recontextualize, but you leave the name, it's like, okay, you know, there's some sort of non-acknowledgement, it seems, about whatever it is that this person has done that drove it to be recontextualized.
So,
No, I was going to say, I think for the sake of this question, we can include also monuments, like either taking down, recontextualizing, renaming. I think you can consider monuments, schools, roads, whatever.
Right.
I think it's all encompassing.
And, you know, the big one right now that a lot of people are looking at is Civil War. You know, the generals and the leadership from the Confederacy. You know, we have primary source documents that tell us the Confederacy was founded on the basis of slavery, on keeping black people, African Americans, as slaves. That was the entire point. They fought to have this ideal of oppression saved, you know. And so when we idolize or, you know, just really literally engrave these names into our buildings, onto, you know, our street signs or schools, whatever, you know, we sort of leave the ideal that they are in a high place of honor when they fought for the oppression. You know, it seems, why would we want to idolize that?
Well, and that's a very important point, because you look at the time period in which all of this is happening. I mean, Jim Crow era, right? Like, it's not 1870s, it's not the 1880s. It's in response to Reconstruction. And, you know, the Confederate statues here in Virginia that arose or often were around really the early turn of the 20th century, put up very intentionally as a response. And you can go back and look at the remarks of folks who gave the speeches when the statues were erected. You can go back and look at their thoughts outside of that and see what these folks were thinking and why they did what they did. You know, I too think it's got to be a little of both. And, you know, doing that work, helping out here locally with Longwood University and renaming buildings and understanding why it's important to do that. I think if in 50 years people are renaming stuff still, like, I think that's their prerogative, right? But I think it has to be okay for our mindset, our opinions, our ideals to kind of maybe change or evolve when we're presented with new information. And I think Leah and I have this conversation quite often, that humans are very imperfect. And so here at the museum, we're really quick to say, you know, don't demonize, but don't deify these individuals, because they're humans and they're imperfect. And everybody's got a skeleton or two in their closet. And so when you find out about it, does that negate all the good work? Not necessarily, but it makes them human, which is imperfect.
Yeah.
And then it allows a person to be a whole person. Like, they get to be a person, period.
Yes.
Versus this grand figure to aspire to. And, like, I definitely agree with rename and recontextualize. You know, watching the monuments being taken down on Monument Avenue in Richmond, I was like, all right, cool. Okay, this is it's really happening. Okay. And then watching it happen and, like, all right, so what's next?
Right.
And I like, when I drive home, I have like 2-hour drive, so this is what I think about when I'm driving home. It's like, well, if you keep the pedestals up, then that way you have that to start the conversation. Like, this is why this is here in this place. This is why it was taken down. So that gives the removal and the recontextualization to explain that the people who were in power put this up because they were looking back on what they want it to happen, which is the oppression and the dehumanization and the use of economic labor, physical labor, and let's be clear, the sexual labor of people with no control.
Yeah.
Versus 2020, who's a citizen has changed. The fact that people are citizens and their voice matters, they matter, and their vote matters. All these things play into what we know as a democracy. So to have things that only honor one aspect, and then the treasonous aspect against the union, let's be clear, it definitely negates or harms like what the U.S. is supposed to be. It goes against our ideals as a unified nation. But then another conversation is not everybody in the nation wants us to be unified. But that's another question for later in the pod. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, monuments in general, I mean, in an ideal place, in an ideal world, like our institution wouldn't exist, right? We wouldn't need this reminder of what happens when you don't live up to American ideals and what happens when you mistreat people for just having a skin complexion that they can't control, right? Like, ideally, we wouldn't need them, but we do, we do have them, and it's important that we do continue to remember, because if we don't, back to the quote question, like history's going to repeat itself, right? And it still is repeating itself.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
one of my, and I should have actually said this, if you wondered what you'd be doing during the Holocaust, during the Civil Rights Movement, you're doing it right now, right? Because that stuff is still happening. It may look different, it may manifest itself in a different way, but it's still occurring.
Yeah.
So on to question 3.
Yep. So my question is, how can someone preserve their site or building?
That is an excellent question. We could start a whole series on that, honestly. Since I've been here in 2016, the amount of calls, the amount of emails, requests I've gotten just to have more information about how we became an institution, it's been a lot, right? I think we're very lucky, very fortunate that we had kind of the stars aligning in the way that they did for our institution to exist. And so actually, let me give you our 30-second kind of elevator pitch version of what that was. So this building, which was the first black high school in Prince Edward County, was a school until around 1993. Some concerned citizens wanted to purchase the building with the idea of turning it into a museum. The county charged them approximately $300,000. This building was not worth $300,000, but all that to say, they did raise that money in the early 90s to purchase this building around 1996. And then in 1998, after frustration from the state level at not being given state historic landmark status, in 1998 we received national historic landmark status, and then therefore kind of retroactively get granted that state kind of recognition. And then we opened up it as a museum in 2001. So in our case, we were lucky on a lot of fronts, right? We had a building that structurally was pretty sound, although in 2000 it was 69 years old in the year 2000, and 2001 70 years old when they opened up as a museum for the first time. But we're very lucky because they didn't need to do much work structurally because the building was standing. We're also lucky and fortunate that just the energy here in Prince Edward County, we coalesced around this history, right? This was a super necessary thing for this community to do because they didn't want this history to be wiped away. And I think that's because of the nature of what this history is. And you can go back to W.B. Du Bois and his study on the Negroes of Farmville, right? There's a certain hopefulness about the Negroes in Farmville, right? The African-American community in Farmville has always been different. There's been not to say that other African-American communities have not been resilient or had grit, but like here in Prince Edward County, no matter what the issue was, there was this persistent systemic kind of fight back, right? And so I think the descendants of those groups who are still here were like, hey, we have to do this for Martha E. Forrester. We have to do this for Barbara Johns. We have to do this for the thousands of kids who lost years of their education because the public schools closed for 5 years. So there was that energy that just didn't exist in other places because the same history didn't happen in other places. So in our case, we were very lucky that the energy was there and that the community really coalesced around this history and made it a concerted effort to preserve this building. And then it kind of from there, kind of from 2001, it was like a snowball rolling down the hill, right? So we hired an executive director in 2008. And then in 2011, we did half of the renovation. In 2013, we did the second half of the renovation. And now we have a Smithsonian level quality museum housed in the heart of Virginia in Farmville, where not a lot of people are going to go unless they're trying to go to Farmville. In other areas, it's just different, right? A lot of folks who call, this is this old colored school or this old kind of enslaved kind of cabin or things like that. things that just given their demographic, there's just not a lot of a substantial amount of people there who are interested. Also, we benefited from being a story that we can easily tell as a lesser told story in American history. Not that other areas are not, but like we could very easily say, look, this is 1951. These students are nonviolently protesting. There's Barbara Johns, who led the strike, which led to Davis, which led to Brown versus Board of Education. There's this tie into things that were already established kind of in the lexicon of American history. There's not necessarily the same in other places for some of these smaller sites and buildings and such that people want and should be preserving, that they kind of feel that call to. So we had kind of a platform that gave us kind of a national connection, which really brought in those dollars. So I say all this to say that's probably not very helpful to a lot of people who might be listening, and certainly to who would be asking that question. But what I will say is get a group of people together. Get a group of people together who care about this, right? Who could be committed, make them, this can be your de facto board or your council or whatever you want to call them, right? And then you use your spheres of influence to try to get other people who may not be as dedicated, but may be kind of peripherally interested in this issue and interested in helping. I'll encourage you to reach out to Preservation Virginia if you're in the state, but if you're not in the Commonwealth of Virginia, reach out to your own kind of preservation area. Here in Virginia, I also would encourage you to reach out to Virginia Humanities, folks who are steadily giving grants and things to help this preservation work. Call us, email us. We're happy to kind of chat with you a little bit more about it, but like use these organizations that are in place, figure out kind of these historical grants, try to get protection status through historical status, and then from there just do your best to raise the money and raise the funds. There's no we didn't know how this was going to play out when we first started. We just kind of did it and it happened, right? But like just you have to start somewhere, right? So find your starting point, find your group of people, and then kind of go from there seeking those statuses. I'm not sure you all's thoughts on it as well, because I talked for a long time.
I mean, but like picking back onto that. So you have a site. What's your site's significance? Like, write it down. What's your site's narrative? Write it down. So in your narrative, which groups can you add in? Which names can you tap into that may be a resource? So kind of like build a network for the site, and then start applying for grants. Like find a good grant writer, because that's like the essential. And then, because you already know why your site's significant, you have to like market it as well. And then depending on, like if it's a building, when was it built? How was it paid for? So thinking like air structure, New Deal money. So you have to find like the spider web of significance and then branch out from there.
6 degrees of separation, right?
Yeah.
Like if you find out somewhere that, oh, this is where George Washington passed through on his way to, look, I've been to so many sites that are just like, oh, Thomas Jefferson might have been here in the mid, and that's what you have to do, unfortunately, because if there's not that connection that people can make, through their experience, through their kind of historical research, then they're not going to be invested in it. But if you can figure out something, even if it's grasping at straw, something that can make that connection, they might make it a little bit easier.
It also seems, you can preserve a site or a building, but what happens with the history? Why should the history remain relevant to the youths? When they're learning about this, why should they want to say, oh, that's interesting, like kind of want to learn more about that?
Relevancy.
Preserving the story as well as the physical being.
Here in Virginia, we have standards of learning. I don't know if we have any out-of-state listeners, but if you do, you probably have Common Core, but Virginia has SOS. So, if you are, or if you go to private school, maybe you don't have either, but every pretty much history unit somewhere has something about local history, right? So making that kind of plea to be like, hey, this is our local history, not state, not national, but our local history. And this is important for us to preserve. That way you can get the buy-in from the schools, in the area, and maybe that'll give you some, help you build some traction in that regard. There's so many sites that need preserving, but only a limited amount of dollars. But like I said, your National Humanities, NEH, Virginia Humanities, if you're in Virginia, your preservation organization for your state can be of great guidance. and potential monetary donations. There are a lot of dollars out there. There are a lot of grant dollars. Finding a grant writer is crucial. But if you can't, because sometimes they could be expensive, learn. I guess that's the thing, right? Get the reps in, learn how to find somebody who will proof and consult with you to help you become, be as good as you can of running these grants and getting approved for these grants, because there's so many sites out there that need to be reserved. Yeah. Anything else from you all?
Nope, I think I'm good.
Yeah, have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy turkey.
Yeah, I think this episode will come out on the 23rd, so Thursday should be Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. Eat a lot of turkey, as you should do if you eat turkey, or something at least that's flavored like turkey. We'll be back in your speakers and your earbuds in about a week's time. If you have questions, email us, info@motonmuseum.org, or DM us on social media. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.